Here we are back at the start menu. Welcome back, everybody. And you might have different images than I do. Well, for now, the image is not really that important. Instead, we're going to use a shape. So let's go to the Create New button and go back to the presets. Remember our old friend, the presets? Well, let's go ahead and create a new preset, a new canvas, if you will. Now, the first thing, of course, if you want to name it, you can. Let's go ahead and call it the red circle, I believe. Okay. And then for width and height, let's go ahead and keep the same dimensions I have over here. 400 width, pixels that is. Make sure the height is 400. The orientation, okay, as you can see, that is in the portrait mode, and that's fine. Make sure the resolution is at, well, I have it at 144. We can bring it back down to 72 since we're familiar with that. Leave it at pixels per inch, RGB color, 8-bit, and the rest is pretty much okay. So here are your dimensions. Let's go ahead and press create. And this is what we have. We have a canvas here. So it's about 400 by 400 pixels. And we can confirm that by going up to image and then go down to image size. And this dialog box appears, and as you can see, pretty much all the numbers that we use to create this canvas is right there. There's a 400 by 400 pixels, 72 screen resolution, and let's go ahead and press OK. So what I want us to do now is to create a circle inside this canvas, and let me show you how. There's three different icons that I want to focus on and introduce to you here on this left side, which is known as the toolbar. And the first one is the marquee tool. Now you notice there's a circle here. You might have a square. Okay, so let me show you how to change it into a circle. All you got to do is, you'll notice that there's a little arrow on the lower right. Just go ahead and put the cursor on that arrow and press and hold. There you have it. Now you have the choice between a rectangle or an elliptical, which is a fancy way of saying circle. Let's go ahead and click, and notice right away you have a circle. So what I'd like for you to do is move the cursor over the canvas, starting from the upper left. Let's go ahead and from the upper left click and drag, and you'll notice a circle with little small dots appearing. Well, I like to refer to those small dots as marching ants. Now what we want to do is we want to fill this circle of marching ants with a color of our choice. So the second icon on the toolbar I'd like to introduce to you are these two icons. Okay, now they kind of look strange. Actually, it's one icon, even though they may look like they're two. But you notice the black icon, if I stopped and held the cursor over, foreground color. There you see it says set foreground. If I move the cursor to the white, it'll say set background color. Well, what we want to do is set the foreground color. So let's go ahead and click on the black or whatever color the foreground is currently, and you'll notice that this dialog box appears. Okay, this is the color picker, and the way the color picker works is the first thing you do is slide up and down, and you'll notice that it has a rainbow of colors that you can choose. Let's say we want to choose a red. That's about right about there. And then what I do is I go into this area, okay, and I can choose a shade of red. Now you'll notice this box right here. You'll notice that when I move the cursor around, notice that it changes to different shades of red. And yes, black is actually a shade of red. So let's go ahead and, well, let's make it as red as possible. So I'm going to leave it about there, press OK, and notice that the foreground color has been changed to red. The third icon I wish to introduce to you is the paint bucket tool. There it is right there. Okay, now the paint bucket tool, you might see the gradient tool, or you might see any one of these other tools. Well, again, press and hold, and you'll have the option of selecting any one of these three icons. I'm going to ask that you choose the paint bucket tool, move that cursor over the canvas where the marching ants are still marching, and then I'm going to ask you to click. And there we have our red circle. So with the red circle now in there, the image, however, is the same. It looks different, but the dimensions, the numbers, they're still the same. Let's go to image, and let's go to image size, and there you see it. Now the canvas here is different. It's red, but it's still 400 pixels by 400 pixels, 72 resolution. One thing I do want you to note is this little icon right here, the constrained aspect ratio, and that's going to be important in a few minutes here. So let's press OK, and we checked off dialog box, so we kind of understand what the dialog box is. Now I want to go over changing size on a fixed aspect ratio. Well, what is that? Let's go back to the image, and let's go back to the image size. Again, I'm going to draw your attention to this icon right here. This, if I click on it, now some of you may see something different. You guys may see something like this. You'll notice that there is a bent line, okay, that sort of connects the height and the width. Well, what does that do? Well, watch what happens when I change the number. So instead of 400 by 400, if I change the number to 800, because they're linked, the width will change along with the height. Now, if I go even higher, if I change the height this time, the width will change as well. Let's press OK. There you have it, a much bigger circle. Okay, but the aspect ratio, which is the ratio of height and width, is maintained. So hopefully you'll understand what the aspect ratio means. Now what I like to do is draw your attention to the History tab right over here. Okay, so if I click on the History tab, okay, there it is right there, you'll notice there are several steps. Now these steps are what we took together to get to this point. And if I was to click on Paint Bucket, notice that it actually shrinks the image back to before we made it bigger. So it is now back to the 400 by 400 dimension image that we created. Let's go click on the elliptical marquee tool. Notice that the paint bucket has disappeared, or the color from the paint bucket. You see, this is the step that we took before the paint bucket. Now if we go back to paint bucket, notice that the red appears. And that's the beauty of the history. You can undo and redo to your heart's desire. So I can go way back to even before I put in the marching ants. So I'm going to go back to the marching ants, back to the paint bucket, and I will leave it at that. Next thing we're going to talk about is changing a ratio that is not fixed, the not fixed aspect ratio part. Okay, so what are we talking about? Well, let's go back to the image dialog box, click on image, let's go ahead and click on image size. Alright, here we are, back to the 400 by 400. This time what I'm going to do is ask you to do not constrain the aspect ratio as the alt tag says there. So let's go ahead and click on that link. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and increase the height from 400, let's say, to 800. Notice, because the width and the height are not connected by this icon, the 400, the width, does not change. Only the height changes. So let's press OK and see what happens. Wow, look at that. That is an oval shaped image, and that's the result of an aspect ratio that is not fixed. Hopefully you'll understand that. And once again, notice that the image size, we are still in the history palette. Okay, or and let's go ahead and click on Paint Bucket and return back to where we started with the pouring of the creation of the red circle. So we've covered the not fixed aspect ratio. All right. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is increasing the canvas size. Now, I've got a red ball, and the white area over there is basically the canvas. That's how much space I have left to do anything else with this image. Well, obviously, as you can see, there's not much room. I don't have much space to put in other little circles unless they're really small, or maybe I want to put something inside the circle itself. But what if I want something around this circle? What if I want something to add to this image? Well, I can't do that because, like I said, I got little space. Well, let's go ahead and solve that issue. If you're in the history palette, let's go ahead and click on layers, okay? And you'll notice that this is a single layer. Well, not a problem. The way we increase this size, okay, and the reason I point this out, because ideally speaking, we want to have multi-layers. In this case, for this exercise, to keep things simple, I have it as single layers. But when it comes to increasing the canvas size, it doesn't matter. So the way to increase the canvas size is go to Image, and then go to Canvas Size. There you have it. And you'll be introduced to this dialog box right here. Now you notice right off the bat that there is a width and a height, but they're in inches. Well, we want pixels. So what you want to do now is go ahead and click on the drop down menu and select pixels. Usually both numbers here, width and height, will change simultaneously, and you don't have to do much after that. But what if I want to change the number? This is the actual size of the image, not necessarily the canvas. We want a bigger canvas. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to go ahead and increase the width to 800, and you'll notice there is no link icon here. So I have to increase the size of both numbers. Okay, there we have it. Now I'm going to press OK and watch what happens. There it is. Now I've got more room, more space, more area to work on. And that's how we increase the canvas.